Powcast Sports. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. All right. Good morning, Philippines, and good afternoon, Australia, and good day to the rest of the world. My name is Pao. Welcome again to our Powcast Sports Podcast Live Edition. To all my followers in the Philippines, kamusta po kayo lahat? Mga boxing fan dito sa Pilipinas, mga Pinoy boxing fans. I will tell you this. I will tell you why you need to stay and finish this podcast. And no, I'm not going to give away any prizes at the end of the show. So scratch that off. What I can tell you though is that our guest today is a boxing genius, from what I've heard, and he has traveled around the globe for boxing, and he is a manager, a promoter, a podcaster, international boxing talent scout. Yes, for all the boxers, sa lahat po ng boxers na nanonood, this may be your opportunity to maybe get scouted or maybe at least learn what's in the mind of the scout and how they identify future talents or boxers to sign for. In Tagalog, let me just say it in Tagalog, sa mga boksingero po na nanonood ngayon o kaya mga gusto mag-boxing, ito na siguro yung pagkakataon nyo na marinig on how the talent think and paano ba sila maghanap ng mga talent. Kaya relax lang kayo, and sabi nga doon sa t-shirt ni Mike, get a popcorn ready because it's gonna be a good show. So here comes the Boom Boom Pow. This is Powcast Sports Podcast, hosted by Pow Salute. All right, I'm joined with Mike Altamura. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Absolute pleasure to be joining you, and definitely get the popcorn ready.
All right. Well, MTK Global consultant, scout, boxing manager, a promoter, a host of the Fight Game podcast. Mike, aside from those things that I mentioned, just so I can introduce you further, so I don't miss anything about you, what can you say about the people that's watching about you?
Well, I'd say first and foremost that I absolutely love this business. I was born into boxing. My dad's a former professional fighter and trainer. He was training on the national team. So from when I was a young kid, I've grown up around the boxing industry. I started managing athletes when I was 17 years of age by accident. So I was working as a journalist for Ray Wheatley's World of Boxing magazine. I started with Ray Wheatley's World of Boxing when I was 11 years of age, and was just doing like amateur boxing results and kept building my credentials as a journalist. Started, like I said, by accident as a manager when I was 17, and here I am now 19 years later, still in love with the sport more than ever.
Wow. Okay. Very young age. Did you say 11 as a journalist? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So yeah, and look, preface the word journalist by essentially amateur results, and then with a one line about the fight. So one line surmising the fight. It still was great experience, and it's what helped to cultivate a passion. And I'd say, like, by the time I was about 15, I was a competent journalist. 11 through to 14, it was just essentially people doing a young kid a favor because he had a passion for the sport.
Okay. Well, it's still a good start. I mean, that's probably the reason why you know a lot about boxing, because you started really, really young.
Yeah, well, Ray made it very worthwhile for me. Like, people don't realize that, say, now the good part is in boxing, you can type in somebody's name. Say, for example, I seen either you just had the gentleman on the show or we scheduled, the great Luisito Espinosa. And, you can go and punch in his name on YouTube and you might find 20, 30 fights, whatever it may be. Whereas back in my day, if you wanted to see someone like Luisito Espinosa, you either needed to be able to catch it live, whether on Sky Sports in Australia or Fox, or start tape trading. And one of the benefits of working for Ray Wheatley was he used to pay me in boxing videotapes. So I was enthused to send him the results because my trade-off was, a tape a month. It was perfect. As a young kid, especially in that era where it was very difficult to find footage, it was very, very beneficial to learning more about the sport. And I guess when you're deprived of something, you're hungry. I don't think, like, sometimes people nowadays, because there's so much access to information, you don't appreciate it. But
Mm-hmm.
back then, I was like, wow, like I've been reading, like I had a, like Espinosa is a great example. I had a
Uh-huh.
trading card of him, KO Boxing Series, in 1991. The first time I heard of him was probably like 1990, when I was like 7 years of age, reading about him in the magazines. However, I never saw him fight till about 1995.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you a bit of context of, how boxing was in those times.
Oh yeah, well, a lot has changed, especially about you. I mean, from a young kid in Australia, now you've been traveling so often and meeting new people. I just want to get fast forward a little bit. I'm just
Yeah.
curious because I've seen your podcast and you've traveled a lot. You meet a lot of people. Um, how do you usually like? This is a simple question. How do you introduce yourself to someone that doesn't know you? A young man who's been traveling a lot.
So a random person or someone in the boxing industry?
Yeah,
If it's
maybe someone in the boxing industry that hey, first time you're meeting.
it's I always say to people, like I'm an athlete manager, and I've had to learn over time that it doesn't hurt to sell yourself a little bit. So I've been blessed to work with 9 world champions. So 9 fighters and 1 world titles on my watch, and that should be a first introductory point. So sometimes
Right.
the person, kind of the inner person in me, is like saying, it seems a little bit like you're tooting your own horn, so to speak. So
Yeah, yeah,
it serves as a purpose to be able to say, look, I'm an athlete manager. And then when people ask you, okay, who do you work for, or whatever it may be, then you can give some context. But generally, that's the way it'll be. If, say, it's a random person I'm introduced to,
mm.
I'll usually tell them, yeah, I manage professional athletes. And then when they ask and they find out it's combat sports, it goes two ways. They're either super intrigued, or they're like shocked and mortified because they didn't think that maybe the way I present or the way I speak, I would be involved in something they perceive as being kind of a very dark domain. So it's interesting, but more than anything, like you try and carry yourself in a humble fashion. And so I've had to learn a lot more over the years of how to carry myself and how to
Mhm.
introduce myself. But it still feels awkward when I'm like, hello, Mike Altamura, yeah, boxing manager. Like, it's awkward.
I'm curious because you mentioned sometimes you introduce yourself with 9 world champions. Is there
Yeah,
kind of a like aside from a belt, do a manager like have a ring to show championship? Maybe just show that hey, this is my
no
nothing like
rings,
that.
no rings. No,
Okay.
the WBC, I believe, have a trainer's ring,
Ah.
which I think is fantastic, and there's that kind of accomplishment. On the management side, again, you could request to have something made, but I think that that's on the braggadocious side. So, look, they always say that if you're proud of a body of work, then the award's already made. So the award is seeing your athlete achieve their goals, and that's the thing. Like in this industry, we should always endeavor to keep the focus on the fighter. They're the ones
Okay.
stepping inside the ring. They're the one laying it all on the line. So yeah, I'm
Okay.
fine with not having any management rings, so to speak.
We're certainly going to talk about the boxers, but let me just talk about yourself first, if you don't mind. I saw this photo and tell me this. Um, in one of your podcasts, and I forgot the number, you mentioned a number of travels.
Yeah.
So I don't know how do you keep up. It looks like your home is the airport.
Pretty much. Yeah, that photo's from May of last year, so I'll get back to that in a second. But
Hmm.
yeah, 2018, I accumulated 111 flights to 26 countries, which is essentially a flight every 3 days. And I took most of November and December off because I was depleted. So had I stayed at my previous pace, I might have hit 120. But that was 2018. I realized I needed to make some adjustments. And then 2019 was around 60 flights, something like that, which is, that's a pretty modest pace for me. And then this year we're stuck at like, I was at like 17 the first 3 months, and now I'm stuck at home. So this is going to be my lightest schedule, my lightest year for many years. In regards to photo, literally, I arrived at the venue an hour before Maruti was set to walk out against Masayuki Kuroda, IBF mandatory world title fight at flyweight. So, uh, long story short, I was in Arizona for another fight. Went to the airport. There was a mix-up with my flight. Uh, I couldn't catch the flight out of Arizona and make my connecting flight in LA. So I thought either I'm going to be a day behind schedule and miss Maruti's fight, but knowing him and knowing his character and the kind of individual that he is, I knew I needed to be there. I had to find the way no matter what it cost me. So from Tucson, Arizona, I found, there he is, the champ. I found a flight out of San Diego, California. It was leaving at 1 p.m., 10 p.m. It's like 5:30 in the morning at this stage in Tucson. I booked the flight, and then I look up the distance. I look up the distance, booked the flight. I was like, all right, I can do this. I couldn't find a flight, not from Tucson, not from Phoenix, nowhere to San Diego. So my only option was a 700-kilometer Uber, which cost me, in the end, it was $530 US for the Uber, and an additional 150 I needed to tip the driver Vance to convince him to take me all that way. So it was a very expensive trip, but Maruti retained the world title, so that's all that matters.
It's all worth it after all the troubles and
I think after the travels and all the additional costs and everything, yeah, I was left with about $100-200 from my management share on the fight. But like I said, it's worth it, especially for a man of as exemplary character as Maruti is. I needed to be there. It was never a question.
okay. I'm curious to know this travels. Is this because of the management side of boxing, or is it on the scouting side? Because you mentioned you're managing Maruti, that's why you have to be there in the fight.
Yeah, so
But this travels. Hmm.
it's on both. So I'll preface by saying, like, 2018 was an unbelievable year, very, very crazy schedule. I had 4 athletes I managed win world championships in that year. So you can imagine a lot of travel. And then there's about another 6 or 7 I represent the challenge for world titles within that 12 months. So very busy year. Also, January of that year, I came on board with MTK Global, and incredible company to work for, hence why I'm still there to this day. And early days with the company, we needed to figure out a lot of the structuring. So one of my primary jobs that first 12 months was to travel, to explore new markets, to seek to recruit the necessary personnel to keep building operations.
Hmm.
And then once we had kind of built our operations team, I could work a little bit more of a more reduced schedule travel wise. So it was a manic 12 months, but very, very rewarding. I'll probably never repeat that kind of travel schedule in my life, but that's fine. It was something that really, for me, like, I was hungry the whole year. I felt motivated, and
Hmm.
I could see that we're building something very, very special moving forward.
Okay. I'm curious, and if you can answer this or not, because you've been traveling a lot. Do you have family or kids?
No kids, no family, which is what makes it a lot easier. But uh,
Yes.
like I said earlier, I'm 36 now.
Hmm.
37 in December, and not why am I saying December? I'm even forget my own birthday, September. Sorry. Uh, so um, there's considerations I need to take moving forward for the future, because I'm aware that it's very hard to have personal life stability when you're on such a manic schedule.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, probably that's gonna happen soon. I mean, you meeting a lot of people, but hey, enjoy while you're still single. It's hard when you have family. It's hard to travel. Anyway, I promised the Filipino boxing fans, as a scout, I need to ask you, how do you discover talents, to sign for MTK? Can you share a little bit about that process?
Yeah, well, I think it's very diverse. So I'll break it down by this. So you were just talking about being single, right? So I'll touch on an analogy from that.
Okay.
If you if you want the prettiest girl on campus, usually you got to go and find her. So what that means in boxing terms is that you have to always be proactive with your scouting, which means that we watch everything ongoing in the amateurs very, very closely. Your your primary signings are going to come out of the elite amateurs, but oftentimes you have fighters that fall through the cracks, and you see that a lot with the Philippines. Like for example, Emir Marcial, most touted Filipino boxer in many years, out of the amateurs, but pretty much like 90% of your elite successful Filipino professional boxers don't have that amateur pedigree.
Hmm.
So, say, someone like John Real Casimiro, a lot of learning on the job, a lot of learning development, as is Manny Pacquiao, greatest example. Look how young you turn professionals. So, it's not that you just solely scout out of the amateurs. You've got to be watching different markets around the world. The good thing we have at MTK Global now is because of how strongly we've expanded universally, and then managing the likes of Tyson Fury, Josh Taylor, Noreen Ubali, the kid I represent, Maruti Matalani. When you have elite world, Billy Joe Saunders, when you have elite world championship level fighters, a lot of people want to join that management stable or collaborate with you. So that's the second kind of phase, I guess, of scouting, which is that we sift through a lot of requests or a lot of inquiries, and we figure out which athletes are the right fits with the company. So I feel like that's an area you have to always stay very hungry and very active, because I've seen it time and again. Like there'll be a manager who's on top of the world, and then they stop recruiting. Maybe they get a little misguided, maybe a little complacent, and within 3 or 4 years, they're no longer in that standing within the sport. So you need to always be building the future generations, which is why it never stops. You're always looking, you're always inquiring, and like I said before, you're always chasing that prettiest girl on campus because you want to ensure that your future's solid.
You look for the prettiest and the youngest too, because you always have to look.
And with the most
Oh
characters
yeah.
like one on one. Like I get asked a lot of times what I look for when I'm scouting an athlete or when I meet with an athlete. And
Hmm.
look, if I'm meeting with you, I believe you can fight. I believe you can fight enough that we could represent you. But first and foremost, I'm looking at the character. If I see a flaw in the person's character, then it doesn't matter how technically gifted they are.
Okay, you must have very good eye in looking for talents. And I was gonna ask you about that, but before, because you mentioned Umir, and I'm just curious to ask this. Umir, for a while, has a lot of speculation, rumors about different promoters and managers trying to sign him. He did mention Shelly Finkel,
Yeah.
and another boxers, I mean promoter manager from the U.S. Was MTK in that mix? Is that something you can share?
I would say that he came up on our radar,
Uh,
and and we're definitely very open, very interested in breaking into the Filipino market. I feel
mhm.
like it's a hotbed for talent, and if you put the right infrastructure in place, you're going to continue to see top tier talent develop. In his case, I don't think anyone was ever going to be able to compete with Senator Pacquiao. Soon as Manny
Ah,
made his intentions clear, I don't think anyone was ever going to be able to compete with him in that case specific.
okay. All right. Anyway, I'm sure there are a lot more talents around the world. But you mentioned the character, the character, the skills. any other specific criteria or like yes or no signal in a boxers that you looked at and say, oh, this one is good, but not this, something like that.
Ability wise, I feel like it's how they hold up when they're battle tested. And that's the beauty of going to elite tournaments in the amateurs, because sometimes someone will look spectacular day one, and then you're like, wow, I want to sign this kid. What an incredible talent. And then the next day they encounter a different style, whether it's a southpaw, whether it's a strong pressure fighter, and you see them fall apart a little bit. And it gives you an overview of, okay, well, that's how they handle the pressure in this situation. So for me, like, character bleeds into a lot of different areas, but I look at, what their flaws are,
Okay.
because in anything in life, you're only as good as your lapses. So if you're a great power puncher, but as soon as you get pushed back, you don't know how to handle the situation, or if you have questionable stamina or whatever it is, a lot of it's guessing game, and we get it wrong. At times, I'm not going to say we get it right all the time, because there's fighters I've overlooked and turned down that went on to win world titles, and
Uh-huh.
then I'm just standing there like, ah. But usually, you use your instincts, and you need to be confident in your instincts.
Okay. Do you look for any other criteria outside of boxing? So, like character outside of boxing, how they present themselves, how they talk, how they look, is that a
Yeah,
consideration?
yeah, that's everything. Yeah, that's everything, and that's what I was saying earlier, because you can usually read someone's intentions from there. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm not going to give you the name because I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
sell the kid out. It's a very, very talented kid from the Philippines a few years ago I was talking to. And
Oh,
it was actually, I was in Senator Pacquiao's camp in Jensen when he was preparing for Brandon Rios.
okay.
And so the uncle brings the kid to see me, and he says, "Oh, what do you think?" I'm like, "He's an exceptional fighter. Like, I would be interested, but where's his head at?" So I speak to the kid, and I ask him what his goals are in boxing, and 80% of the conversation from him revolved around how he could come out to Australia to spar. And I realized for all his abilities, he was perceiving it as one grand holiday. Whereas the fire I wanted to see was him saying, yeah, I want to be a world champion. I want to beat the best. I want to fight the best. I didn't see that fire in him. So straight away, I turned it down. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can usually read the character, because even if people try and bluff you, it comes to the surface sooner or later.
Mm, okay. That's too bad. But because most of the time, Filipinos are really shy, and sometimes there's the like language barrier because in the Philippines, and probably it's the same around the world. The boxers came from the poorest of the poor, and
Yeah, yeah,
they're not used to speaking, and they may be a little bit intimidated. And these stories I've heard, and I've always talked to boxers here, when I try to let them talk, they're very afraid. But how do you differentiate if especially if you're targeting a market like the Philippines, for example, people
yeah,
are shy. Like some of these kids, when you talk to them, you won't really see. They can't say, "Hey, I want to be a world champion," because they feel it's like bragging. Because Manny Pacquiao is always like they look at Manny as an example. Like, oh, he doesn't brag. He doesn't say he's gonna win this.
yeah.
Um, how do you filter out of that?
How do you build that? It's from
Filter,
the
filter.
ground up.
Mm-hmm,
From the ground up, you need
mm-hmm,
to you need to make the kids more comfortable to vocalize.
mm-hmm,
That, like, you're a professional fighter, you're an athlete. You need to find your voice. You need to speak up. You shouldn't be subservient to the system.
mm-hmm,
And what I mean by that is, of course, listen to your coach. Follow the guidance of your management. Believe in the direction your management has for you. But also speak out for yourself. Be open about what your goals are, because that's how your team can work most effectively. If
mm-hmm.
you're that shy kid sitting in the corner not saying anything, your team can't guesswork everything. And that
Uh-huh.
also leaves you. The one thing I've learned in my years in this sport is the more silent you sit and the less you say, the more open you are to exploitation.
Yeah.
And that's at every level. And but especially with the athletes. So what I'd say with the athletes is you need to get educated as to the ongoings of the sport, and you need to find that voice early in your life because you only have one chance to do this. You know what I'm saying? And say in the Philippines, like I've seen, this sport changes lives. If you can, I see kids in the Philippines that travel for 4 or 5 grand, and
Yeah.
that can help them to set up a market for whether for their mother, their father, their family, whatever it may be. So the sport does change lives, but where you want to see it develop is the kids to be educated that it doesn't last, that you need to be putting your money away. You need to be maximizing what you earn. You don't want to be, sometimes I see these kids, again, I'm not going to give a specific case, but they get sent to Japan, and I know the purse is 6 or 7 grand, and the fighter ends up with $1,200 of it. It's
Huh.
absolute nonsense. And
Yeah.
you need to eradicate that exploitation. But the way to do it is to educate the fighters and to give them a voice. If they don't have a voice, they'll continue to be exploited.
Right. Right. And and it's the hard fact and truth. It's happening, and I feel bad for these boxers as well. Don't you think? Because like what I said, it's it's good to have a voice, but they don't know how to do it. They're not that educated. Do you think
Yeah.
it's the manager's job as well to kind of help them be like uh like educated in how to speak and how to educate themselves and answering questions and setting their goals and their mindset? Is that, do you think, of especially in our country where
It
people
should be.
happy with just one with that small money, they think it's already big money, but
Yeah,
they're getting maybe 10% of what they should get.
exactly. And that's very short sighted. Yeah, I think it should be on the management, but you have to change the system from within first. So it needs to come down from the structures at the top, which means the governance of the sport. It needs to come all the way from the GAB all the way down. And you need to hold management accountable. You need to look over contracts. You need to ensure that contracts are adhered to. You need to look into when management travel with athletes that there's not double contracts. And that's like one of the things I talk about all the time is transparency. And that's when I talk about transparency, that's what I mean. That if a boxer from, say, we're using the Philippines in this situation, but if you're from the Philippines and you're fighting in Japan, you want to ensure that the contract presented to the athlete is the actual contract. Because a lot of times you'll see one contract gets filed, maybe with the GAB
Hmm.
from that show in Japan, but then there's a secondary contract. And the first contract might be for, say, $2,500. The second one's for $6,000. So where's that 3,500 going? It ain't going to the athlete. And that's a crying shame. So that's the thing is, the infrastructures like this take a long time to adjust. You know what I'm saying? It's not something that just happens suddenly. You need people that are vocal and that aren't afraid to speak up in the game. The problem is if you don't have from the management and promotional side people speaking out, the intensity athletes are repressed unless you have someone high profile come out and say it. But that's the only way you change the structure of the sport going forward. How many notable fighters have you seen that have fought for world championships or have fought the top fighters in the world out of the Philippines, and now later in life they're struggling? There's too many, and
Yeah.
I'm only using the Philippines as an example, but it's the sport the world over. We need to be better. We need to take better care of our athletes.
Okay. All right. You know a lot about boxing, and you know a lot about the issue. Again, but let's switch it up a bit. I don't want to get in trouble. But good, good. I'm always been vocal about that. I'm always for the boxers. And every now and then I talk about protecting the boxers, and I think we have an awakening on this one. Um, this show, you're allowed to talk about anything. We're not. I don't have a boss that would say don't talk about that because we're friends with this and this.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm happy that even someone from the outside recognizes the issue, not just in the again. Philippines is just an example. It's happening everywhere. But you already mentioned how to change it, and it's really a shame. But let's move on. Another topic is this would last for a long time. There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
I want to ask when you discover an athlete and it turned out to be that athlete is a good athlete. h- what sort of feeling do you feel, and how do you reward yourself?
Uh, Good question. I think that the thing is when you sign an athlete, you have the best intentions to take them as far as possible.
Hmm.
But say like someone like TJ Doney, who former IBF 122-pound world champion, who I took on early career, and when you see a kid like that evolve and develop and build confidence, and we always knew the ability was there, but that night when he upset Iwasa at Coracle Hall to win the world championship, that's a life changing moment. That's that moment lasts with the kid forever. And for me, the reward is to be part of that journey. I remember there's a photo that of him uh, kneeling backstage at Coracle Hall
Hmm.
and just like on the floor, just overcome with the moment that he's just won the world championship. And I remember seeing him there, and I was like, I almost felt bad in the moment, but I took a photo of it because I thought, this is a memory that's going to last a lifetime. And when I ran that on social media, it went absolutely viral. Like it had hundreds and hundreds of retweets on Twitter. And because it's for moments like that, to me, that's a reward. And I come out of that and it inspires you to want to keep enjoying those moments. And that's why when I say, like, I've been blessed to work with 9 fighters that won world titles, I'm not going to sit here and say I made 9 world champions. How you hear people say, because that's absolute rubbish. I wasn't in the ring getting hit. It wasn't my courage on the line. I'm just there to guide the kid. End of the day, it's in their hands. But to have a small part to play in that, it's an absolute honor. And it's the reason why I love the sport because I grew up reading about the great champions in boxing, and now I have the opportunity to be right there alongside them. Like, what an absolute joy that is.
Wow, wow, yeah. For a while, actually, is I was thinking about managing, about promoting. When you say it, and then you said that the feelings that you had, it made me feel inspired to. Maybe that's somewhere something I want to look at because I really want to help on a personal level the boxers, and
Yep.
it's just inspired me right now, and thank you very much for those pointers. And so far, we've already spoke for 34 minutes, and I'm still on the first part of my questions. So I don't know if we can fit this to an hour, but I also want to talk about, and forgive me if I'm cutting off a little bit of topics, but of course, I want to talk about your biggest influence in boxing. Is it your father? Who is it? Because you said it was your father who started. Is a
It
box.
has,
Is a boxer.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it has to be my father because that's really what was the inspiration for being involved
Hmm.
in sport, for being interested in sport. And there's moments that I shared with him. Like I remember the day in November 1994 when he drove us to the local pub because there was no boxing on
Hmm.
cable or anything in Australia back then. There was no cable available for the house here period. So he
Hmm.
drove us to the pub and we seen we seen the miracle. George Foreman knocking out Michael Mora to capture the heavyweight world championship at age 45. And sharing moments with him like that is what inspired me to be involved in the sport. Being around athletes like former IBF world champion Lester Alice. And, my father had a very close rapport with Lester. So that's what inspired me to have an interest in boxing. Like I can
Mm-hmm.
remember to this day combing through his magazines and then being interested and intrigued that, say, if a month went by that he didn't buy the Ring magazine or the Fist magazine, I would scramble and raise as much pocket money as possible to go and buy it myself. And so
Wow.
anything I've accomplished in this lifetime, I owe to both of my parents. And that's not to say that I haven't had a lot of inspirations and people that inspire me to be better in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Like guys like Bruce Trampler at Top Rank, uh, Brad Goodman at Top Rank. They've been incredible. Like they've motivated me throughout the years. They've encouraged me, and they're elite. That's elite company.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Sean Gibbons who have always believed in me, who very well in the Philippines because of his
Mm-hmm.
work with so many Filipino athletes. And so I've had a lot of great colleagues in the sport, and I've been blessed to learn from so many gifted and so many talented people in boxing, but it all goes back to my father.
Okay. Right. Well, now you've from your father, from the inspiration and the influence of your father, you became a manager, promoter, and a scout. Right now, at this stage of your career, are you mostly a scout, a manager? What is your main thing right now?
Predominantly management and then overlooking operations in my role at MTK Global. So a
Uh huh.
key component of my job now is, and you have to remember, we have 170 plus fighters.
170.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
Wow, a
plus,
lot.
so
Plus, are you sure
it's
it's not basketball players you're managing?
it's hey, we'll take a cut of someone like LeBron James's salary. That'll help about all the athletes. But no, look, and so a lot of what my current position and my current standing is just identifying which athletes are prepared to develop over the next 12, 18 months
Hmm.
at the world level and creating the pathway. So looking at the sanctioning body, looking at the rankings, things of that nature, and then figuring out what the steps are. So who the necessary opponents are, what the necessary belts are, how to position them, things of that nature. And I'm enjoying this role. Like I love being hands-on with the management. And there's about a dozen fighters that I'm still very hands-on the management side. But this is more a position overseeing operations. And it's something I'm evolving into as I get older. So it probably means that I can maximize, for lack of a better word, my influence in the sport
Hmm.
and minimize the travel commitments, which means that I can have a bit more stability in my life.
Okay. Wow, wow, very accomplished already, and a lot of tasks already under your hands. And I'm glad I was able to set up an interview with you right now at this time because I think a few years after this, you're gonna be real more busy, maybe too high for an interview. But at 36 years old, right? 36.
36.
Is that
I'm
right?
getting old, bro.
Okay.
I'm getting old. I used
Let's
to be
let
a young guy in boxing.
we all get old. But I want to ask you to get older. At 46, how do you see yourself 10 years from now in boxing?
I'm not sure. I'm being honest with you. I'm not sure. I
Oh,
still in love with the sport. If for
hmm.
whatever reason in the next 10 years I fall out of love with the sport, please somebody push me out because I shouldn't be taking up a spot from someone young and hungry who's prepared to give it their all. But uh, we'll see. Like to me, it's always an evolving space, and I think that one of the things that I've probably done in the past, which is I guess, taken away from my enjoyment is placing too much pressure on my shoulders to
Hmm.
succeed or to accomplish certain goals. So I'm just going to keep enjoying the role and
Uh-huh.
keep looking to build and develop our operations. I know long term, our goals within MTK is to be established in every primary market around the world because we feel like we can make a difference. So there's still a lot of countries that we haven't developed into, the Philippines being one of them. And
Hmm.
so we're very open to any possibilities. But it's a day by day proposition, and it's just for me right now. The goal is waking up and still being hungry and still enjoying this current role.
Wow. Okay. Good answer. Safe and good. But you're
Exactly.
still very young. You're still very young. In your role, you're actually, you said you're old, but you're still young. I've seen management as old as 80s and 90s, still very active and still very hungry. Uh, so well, anyway, let's discuss about your experience. And you have a lot of that. One thing that and I finished the podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm coming in hot here. Episode number 9, podcast, the anatomy of a panhandler. You shared this
Yes.
story already, so it's good to maybe we could discuss a little bit more about it in this show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you want to know about the context of it? I think it's all said there. It's a panhandler. So that was a few years back. So end of 2016, I was approached by AL Silk Road Sports, which is a government entity in China, and the
Mm.
CEO was a gentleman. I shouldn't even use the word gentleman because he ain't no gentleman, but a guy by the name of David Pan, hence the panhandler tag. And these guys were committed where they had headhunted me to work in a key role for the company as the
Mm-hmm.
figurehead promoter per se, but also as a promotional partner in all operations. And the base first year deal was $10 million to operate 5 events. And they greenlit me to go and sign a number of high profile athletes. And then after I'd committed them to our joint contract, they tried to retreat. And so essentially, I was left holding the bag. I was left in a position where, in order to maintain my integrity at the time, I needed to continue making these athlete payments. And it was a wild goose chase. I was trying to resurrect the deal, trying to hold it together. And David Pan essentially turned out to be an outright panhandler. But it's a kind of adversity you face. And I learned a lot from that
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say there's always a silver lining. And so I could sit here now and spit venom at him and everybody else in that situation and
Uh-huh.
play the woe is me card. But you know what? Instead, I suck it up. And as they say in boxing, you take it on the chin. It ain't how hard you get knocked down. It's whether you have the fortitude to get back up. So I got back up and I got back to work. And
Mm-hmm.
look at how my life is blessed now. But definitely, if you want to hear an intriguing tale, which is going to send you on an emotional pathway, yeah, please go listen to episode number 9 of the Fight Game with Mike Altamura.
Okay. Well, it's time to promote that then. This is the
Yeah,
logo.
thank you for allowing me to endorse myself.
This
That's
one.
all.
And then yeah. So is this on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube? How do they look for it?
Yeah, so they can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, anywhere where you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find it there. It's
All
audio
right.
only at the moment. I don't particularly enjoy looking at my head too much, so hence why I'm keeping it audio. But looking at your numbers, I think you have the YouTube thing down pat. So I might need a little bit of your advice on how I can expand to YouTube in future.
Sure, sure. We'll get to that, and just send me a message, and uh, I'll give you what I know. But yeah,
No,
well,
thank you.
that story about that experience in China, uh, I feel a little bit. It, I was like into it emotionally. I don't know what happened after. What was the recovery period? Did because you also took out a loan, right? Just to make sure that you could uh,
It was
pay the at least.
yeah, and the thing is, like at one stage, I was over $100,000 in debt,
Wow.
and you and also I'll preface by saying this: if you're in debt to a bank, as uh, as mentally taxing as that is, I don't think it even compares in the slightest to being in debt to your friends, to your
Mm,
colleagues. At one stage, I had $37,500 to pay in a street loan.
Mhm.
And if you miss a payment on that, you may not have any legs to walk with anymore. So it was a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. I completely blame myself for that situation.
Okay.
But the pathway back, once I was able to retrieve the initial funding from them, which was 45,000 US, that was able to erase enough of the debt where I could kick the can down the road,
Mhm.
and and I was solely left with people I owed money to that gave me whatever time frame was required. And so knowing that, say, I had 12, 18, 24 months, whatever it was, then I had a full focus, a 2020 focus to start hunting down targets. And so I hustled for the next 12 months. I was working nonstop. And, like they always say, if you put your energy in the right places, you will be rewarded. And I remember like the close of that year. So it's 2017. TJ Doney wins the world title eliminator. And I had all these other fighters positioning, and I could see that finally by May, maybe May to August the next year, I'll be able to race all the debt. It ended up being by August. It was like that happened. And then at the time, I was representing Isaac Dogbe. And I remember praying the day of that fight when he fought Cesar Juarez in Accra, Ghana. So we'd staged that fight. And I kept saying to myself, if there is a higher power, we're going to come out of this fight with victory. Because I knew that could, it was going to offset everything else that year. First fight
Yeah.
of the year, first major fight in world boxing for 2018. And I felt in my heart that if that rolled out positively, the rest was going to flow. So Isaac stops Juarez. A few months later, he won the world championship against Jesse Magdaleno. In that same time frame, Maruti Matulani on the Manny Pacquiao Lucas Matisse undercard wins the world title against
Yeah.
another fighter I now represent, Muhammad Wasim from Pakistan. And everything just started flowing. And so once it got there, I was appreciative for all the adversity I dealt with because that's why it felt so special. And I've always said that, as much as you got to take the silver lining too, you need to be fortified by adversity, but you also need to learn from your lessons. So I wasn't going to repeat any of those mistakes then or ever again now. So
Okay.
I'm really, to be honest, I'm grateful for everything that happened because it made me more appreciative of everything I've experienced thereafter.
Okay. All right. Turns out well for you. But I've heard a lot of China. China's big market. A lot of boxing now going there, and I
Yeah.
know a lot of Filipino also go there to fight. It's again an alternative for U.S. market. Someone coming from China wanted to work with you again, promise big
Yeah.
money. What steps would you do before you sink your teeth?
Money up front.
Okay.
First,
What?
first contract signed. First contract signed. Like 7 days to pay. If you don't pay, there's no deal. Simple.
Okay.
I,
All
I
right.
will. I will say this though. There is some promoters like Lu Gang in China. I've known Lu over 20 years because he boxed professionally in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
If he ever called me to match a fight or anything on his card or for one of our athletes, I'm happy to work with guys like Lou anytime. But if it's first time promoters or anything like that, there needs to be something up front because the problem is there's no repercussions. There's like it's a system where there's no set authority. So say even in the Philippines, if a promoter double crosses you, you can take your complaint to the GAB. In China, there's like 60 commissions. It's like, who do I even take it to?
Oh
And then
wow.
they're all under different governments, different auspices. So, and then you don't want to be entangled in trying to chase anything legally. No, not in that market. It's just such a convoluted market. So, yeah, money
Okay.
up front. We're happy to enter business with anybody in China. We're open to all experiences anywhere in the world.
All right. Okay. Good that you're still open. Speaking of China and your travel, um, which country that you traveled to you think you've surprised based on your original perception of the country and the boxers? Which country surprised you the most, or?
Good question. I think South Africa. There is so much talent in South Africa. It's mind blowing, and I mean, like you'll see kids like 7-1, 7-2, and I'm looking at them and thinking they'll roll all the top prospects, say in Australia, and they get no publicity. They're matched very tough from when they turn professional.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of these kids are skilled. I mean, great movement, great speed, ring dexterity, battle tested. I think that, especially say because of the influence in South Africa of elite trainers like Colin Nathan, who is with us at MTK Global. So he operates MTK Africa. I think you're going to see a lot of talent development under the radar. And like prime example is Lorato Lamini, who you will know because he beat Penalosa 2 fights back in
Yeah, Dubai,
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi
In Saudi
Arabia. Yeah,
Arabia,
Saudi
on
Arabia.
Billy Mir Khan undercard.
Yeah.
But like Lorato's a kid that he's now 14-1. So there was early stages in his career when he's like 3-1, 4-1. If you're looking at the westernized way of perceiving boxing, his career would be considered a write-off. You'd be, he's got a loss, so he's untouchable now. We don't want to invest in him. He's an exceptional fighter, as you've seen against Dave Penalosa. He's an exceptional fighter. So I feel like that's where I'm surprised. Another market's Japan. Like you have to watch the action up close in Japan to appreciate how many talented young fighters, how many brave warriors there is out there. I mean, you can go to a midweek show at Korakuen Hall and there's 4-round kids that are leaving all on the line, leaving it all in the ring. It's incredible the depth, especially in the lighter weight classes.
Right. I've heard a lot from the Karakuin Hall. I really wanted to go there someday. Um, you also mentioned in one of your, I don't know if it's podcast or the MTK Instagram that it has Karakuin Hall is the best overall environment in boxing.
Yeah, best place I've been to. Incredible atmosphere. So
Better than Vegas.
yeah, no
Oh,
comparison. It's
oh.
genuine. It's genuine. That's the thing. And don't get me wrong. There's nothing like a big fight. Say 80,000 people, Wembley
Mm-hmm.
Stadium at a Joshua fight.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable setting. But in terms of like what I see as a pure boxing venue
Mm-hmm.
and weekly entertainment and a real cultivating a real love for the sport at a grassroots level,
Mm-hmm.
nothing beats Coracoon Hall. The fights that you see there 3-4 days a week when obviously non-COVID periods, during COVID everything's changed, but regularly 3-4 times a week you're seeing Japanese fighters all lay it on the line, and in the Western world most people never see these belts. But I love the atmosphere there. I love the history. So many great fighters have fought at the venue. It has an attachment to professional wrestling. So, like all
Uh-huh.
the major stars, major names in wrestling throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, all have competed or performed there, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of history in the venue, and I love the Japanese culture to boxing.
Right, right. We all know from the Philippines that Japan is a great boxing nation. A lot of champions from Japan. I want to
Yeah,
ask you. You also mentioned South Africa as you've surprised, but what country has the you think from your perspective untapped boxing potential?
that's a good question. Is the Philippines still considered untapped? I mean, look, it would have been pre-Pacquiao. Post-Pacquiao, there's a lot of people searching. I think that there is I will say there's a lot of untapped talent there in terms of, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that they've even touched the tip of the iceberg in relation to preparing professionally with dieting, with training, with strength and conditioning, things like that. I think that there's a lot of ways to further professionalize the sport. And we know that there's a talent there. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of African nations. I mean, Ghana, like Ghana, it surprised me how few gyms have a boxing ring. Like, boxing gyms have a few bags but no ring, and they're sparring on the pavement. And I'm just like, why on earth are they sparring on pavement? But there's that love for the sport that's ingrained in the culture. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to develop talents in spite of the setting. If you professionalize the setting, imagine what you can accomplish. I see a lot of other African nations, Uganda, Kenya. There's so many different places that if you put the infrastructure in place, you can see the sport grow. Like Mauritius, another one. I'll tell you what's usually a good indicator. Uh, Look at what gets accomplished at an amateur level in places where the professional boxing infrastructure isn't solid. Another one, Mongolia. Look at what's been accomplished in Mongolia in the amateurs, but it's not translating to pros because there's not the infrastructure for the pros. So I think that that's usually your indicator of markets that are untapped from a professional boxing perspective.
Okay. Uh, in the Philippines, just to comment on what you said, if the Philippines is still on top or not. Um, I don't know how to say this, but oh yeah, like what you said, there's a lot of potential. But the Philippines really is, it's a Manny Pacquiao country more than a boxing country. More
Yeah, yeah,
people are a Manny Pacquiao fan than a boxing fan, and that's real talk. Boxing, there's a lot of talents, true, and I wish the MTK would, look at the Philippines more. And I know you're going to Japan. Yeah, you will. You're setting up there. I've read that.
well, yeah, we're set
There's a
up
lot of
in
potential. Mhm. Go ahead.
yeah, we're set up in Osaka, Japan.
Yeah. So just like in other countries, it's I think it's more on the the financials and the support of the boxers, because most of the boxers, they would have to work on in the day or at the night and then train, and some of them they don't have the facilities, the right resources. I feel that if we get these resources, then and like what you said, professionalize it, it will have better chances. We looked at Mexico as one of the best market in boxing, as Filipino, because we always say if a Filipino is really good enough, get him to fight a Mexican. Let's
Yeah,
test.
yeah,
Let's test the Filipino. We feel that in local talk, boxing talk, if we have the same structure and the same support, I don't know exactly what I'm talking about in Mexico, 'cause I haven't been there, but we looked at that model, and then if they truly respect and they truly love the sport of boxing, at least being a fanatic of boxing, they support boxing, and they go to the stadium, because here it's hard, especially in Manila. In the province, yes, people go and watch, but it's all for free. So the promoters won't have money. The promoters would
yeah.
have to do an event that so not and they can pay a lot for the boxers. So I felt that there's needed an intervention on that one, and it will be great. Um, where was I? Yeah. So yeah, I think you can still find a lot of untapped talents, and also you mentioned the great amateur, like the Stan country, Uzbeks,
Yep,
the
yep.
Mongolians. In the Philippines, I don't know. It's kind of reversed. Most of the professionals are not really good amateurs here.
Correct. Correct. I mean, look, there's been top amateurs. Harry Tannemore was terrific. Charlie Suarez. There's been a lot of very talented amateurs.
Mm,
Barriga was a very good amateur. But
uh-huh.
usually, yeah, because the system in years past, Filipino kids, if they're inclined to combat sports, it's a way out. They want to start earning money. So if there's not the infrastructure to keep them afloat as amateurs, they're going to want to turn professional. Even if it's just that they're making very small purses, it's something incoming, which is what drives it. And by the way, Mexico is very similar. So
Oh,
it doesn't mean that you need the amateur pedigree in order to thrive. But I feel like there is infrastructure that can be put in place to professionalize the sport. Can we do it, say, from an MTK perspective? Can we do it? Absolutely. We need the local partners to monitor it and make it work, because, I would be a fool if I would say to you that I can go there and open a gym and expect to leave it in somebody's hands who I haven't rapport with. and
Okay.
trust that everything is going to operate the way it should be. You need to ensure that the people that you're partnering with possess the same vision that you do, which is the long-term betterment of the fighters and the sport. It's not just about feigning that that's your intention, but then taking from elsewhere. So sometimes that takes a while, but I'm confident that, say, next 12, 18 months, you'll see us expand into the market.
Yeah, and we'll be waiting. So yeah. All right. Let's move on that. And is it still okay to talk? Cause we're already an hour, or should we do a part two? Because I know you're a busy guy.
Whatever you need, brother. I'm here. I'm at your mercy. I've got the time.
Okay. Thank you very much. See, I met you at the right time. Uh, all right. Let's talk about other things. When I was researching about you, of course, I want to know who I'm speaking to before that, before I actually speak with a guy, so I know what to talk to. I just came on this article about a book because I know you're a boxing genius. Boxing Confidential. Have you seen read that book?
Boxing Confidential. Who's it by?
It's a lot of expose there. I just wanted to see your point of view. Let me recheck that again. It's by Jim Brady.
Yep, yep. What's the context of the book? You're giving me something to go and read and look up, so I like it.
Right. Well, it's very confidential, very critical. I'm gonna read it. It perks my mind because I wanted to get your views, but it's the hardest hitting expose in boxing ever written by campaigning journalist Jim Brady, lays and bare the corrupt history of the noble art. From its marked beginning to the million business a day, delving into extensive FBI files and police documents, he reveals how mafia overtook the sports in the U.S. and how decades of world titles
Mhm.
were effectively controlled by one man, uh, Frank Carvo, the sinister Mr. Gray. Here's the story of a monopolistic international federation. This because they're naming names, so I don't want to say it here, but
Okay,
yeah,
so
I'll send you the link.
okay, so so it delves back into the infrastructure of boxing in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, yeah.
On on the similar subject to that, there's a great book titled
Mm,
Jacob's Beach, which covers the same era and the same people in the sport. So this book might be a very, very good aside to Jacob's Beach. So I'll definitely check it out.
okay. So let's move on. I'm gonna see if I can get a copy of this as well online.
Sure.
I want to talk to you about mismatching in boxing. A lot of fans,
Yeah.
especially casual boxing fans, they're kind of frustrated this day because they can't get. It's hard to get the fight that they want on the right time. What's your comment on this? Why is it hard?
In terms of elite fights or in what
Yeah,
context?
elite in terms of the elite fights, the fan favorite fight. For example, it took Pacquiao and Floyd fight to happen 5 years,
Yeah.
and now fighters champion of this sanctioning body won't fight this fighter at the right time. Why
It
is
comes
it so hard from
economics.
your perspective? Hmm.
Economics.
Okay.
Simple. And I'll give you a little example on that. So, say I'm a promoter and I have the IBF World Champion, and I have another six fighters of mine. IBF might not be the best example because their ratings probably deliver the opportunity the most to the guys chasing the title. But say, for example, just use him as an example. I've got an IBF World Champion,
Hmm.
and I've got five other guys in the ratings, and I know that that guy, that athlete, on my books is ensuring that I retain TV dates, whether say Showtime, ESPN, The Zone, whatever it may be. And then the WBO champion is with a different promoter, and that fighter is attaining TV dates for the promoter. To place those two against each other, and for one side to risk losing their standing in the sport and their stranglehold over a title, you need the economics to make sense. And I know from
Yeah.
a fan's perspective, they're just going to say, well, the best should fight the best. But in
Yeah.
regards to running a successful promotional company, bouts matter. Having elite athletes matters. Having them win matters. And that's why you oftentimes don't see the best fights unless the economics marry up. And that was a situation with Floyd and with Pacquiao, that it kept being delayed because both sides were trying to better the deal and trying to hedge their bets. It might have been the highest grossing bout in history, but at the
Mhm.
initial stages, maybe one side's looking at it and thinking, every time Floyd or every time Manny fights, we're making $12 million profit. If I place him in that fight and he loses, we might make 50 million that night, but then how's it going to affect us moving forward? And I think that that's the reason why you don't see a lot of the major fights come together in the necessary timing, so to speak. The one you will see next year, though, if we keep going the way that things are, which I'm confident we will, is Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. And I think that that timing is absolutely perfect. For once in a generation, the timing is going to be perfect for a major fight.
Right. Yeah. And we're looking forward to that. But I just we'll talk about that later. I just have a follow up on this one, and you said it like economics. You know, this has a backlash from the fans because they keep wanting a fight, and now fans are looking at the other combat sports. And I just wanted to give this example because this month or earlier month, it's just top ranked in the UFC.
Yeah,
It's a different scenario with UFC because they all have the in-house fighters, and
true.
apparently and truthfully, they have the best fighters and the most popular fighters. That's why people watch. And uh, I've shown the stats. 1 million, 1 point something million views against 300,000 on average, or 400,000. Uh, less than 500 on Top Rank. Uh, this type of things, this business, um, it affects the popularity of boxing. And what do you say about that? And now the more young people now, especially here in the Philippines, UFC
Yeah.
is being talked about. Hmm.
Well, different brands, different budgets. The UFC's got a considerably
Hmm.
higher budget to operate events on ESPN comparative to Top Rank. So it's tricky to weigh up uh,
Hmm.
the quality of the cards when you're looking at the budgets. But I'll say this: like, the UFC has put boxing in general on show. The events that they've been churning out during this period have been first class, and the boxing events we're seeing across the board, being brutally honest, have been substandard, and we need to be better. That's the truth. I think that you'll lose the young fans if what they're seeing on TV is not engaging. And you can drop the level of fights that you're placing on TV and they're competitive, but if there isn't high end repercussions, then you're going to lose the fans anyways. Like, it needs to be a fight where they're like, wow, like that's been given to us, and that's the way the UFC has been rolling it out. Of course, they've got their pay per view events, but the fights that they've been rolling out on regular TV that don't require any additional payment have been a few notches above what you're seeing in regards to boxing, and that needs to change. Hopefully, over the next few months, we come back with the counter blow. And by the way, I don't look at UFC as a competitor. I don't see it
Hmm.
as boxing versus UFC. I think that they're both incredible pursuits. And like our management company per se, we represent UFC athletes. We have Darren Till fighting Robert Whitaker tonight.
Oh yeah.
So it's not about boxing versus UFC, but from the boxing perspective, the events have to improve. And I think that in this time, we're seeing it. The other thing I'll say, as you know, with UFC, there's competition in very, very small sectors. Like, One Championship is doing some amazing work throughout Asia. You've got Bellator, companies like that, but
Mm-hmm.
UFC really has a monopoly with the top line fighters, and that's why you're seeing the best versus the best. Whereas boxing is a lot more fragmented, and it's not entirely bad. It might be bad from a viewer's experience, but look at how many companies are afloat around the world and employed by separate boxing entities. because there's so many different organizations. So it's also keeping a lot of people in work.
I like the way you explain that. Yeah, it does make sense. And it's like it's different. Anyway, in reference to boxing matches that never happened, a mismatch. I just to switch it up a little bit. What do you think was the a boxing match that should have happened that did not happen in the past?
Tyson versus Roy Jones should have happened in 2003. It was
Now it's happening.
17.
Happening September.
I know people are going to care, but like, really? Have you watched the movie with Stallone and with Robert De Niro called Grudge Match?
Yeah. Yes.
This is Grudge Match without the grudge. It's just, it's just too. Look, kudos to both of them for stepping in there. They're finding a way to make some money and to shine the light on both their brands. But if that's what has your casual fans excited about boxing, then I'm worried about our future, to be honest. I would have loved to see that fight 17 years ago. I thought that because when Roy Jones beat Ruiz and then Tyson at the same stage, he was faded, but he still possesses that one-punch power. And Roy Jones essentially is a blown-up super middleweight. So it would have been exciting at that time. It was one that I thought would have been an absolute blockbuster at the box office, but it never happened. So that's probably, like, if you're talking super fight, that's probably the fight. Another one I would have loved to see was De La Hoya and Kosciuszko. I think that would have
Oh.
been a spectacular bout.
Oh. Yeah. Well, economics, but this time, this
Exactly.
this guy's Tyson and Roy Jones. There's economics involved. That's why it's happening right now. Uh, so they're launching new
Yeah.
companies. They have their own streaming. So
Yeah.
and good build up too. And to be frankly speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, maybe a lot more people are gonna watch this than the current shows at Top Rank because of the matching. You think
Of
they're
course,
gonna have a lot of pay per view buys?
of course they will. I've got, I've got, I've got, I've got friends that I've known since childhood stopping me on the street, excited about Tyson coming back. I'm like, did you ever watch the bout with Kevin McBride? It was what, 16 years ago. It's like, how are you excited off of a 6-second clip on Instagram? But it reflects, I guess, how big a personality he is.
Yeah.
That even at his age, people can be, for lack of a better word, they're roped into the Tyson buzz, the Tyson hype. I just
Yeah.
hope, that both get out of there safe. I hope that,
Okay.
you
Sure.
know, most of these exhibitions end up in a disaster where the public feel like they've been completely shafted. So I hope that this isn't one of them.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of boxing fans would expect some action, but I actually categorize this as a like a WWE type of event. And if it's WWE, there's a lot of people watching wrestling, so I categorize it as such.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's why it's selling.
it's in their vein, and guess what? The last WWE style boxing exhibition was Ali versus Antonio Inoki
In Japan, right?
in Japan. Yeah, Vince
Yeah.
McMahon involved, Aram involved, and yeah, that was a disaster. So hopefully this one ain't anywhere near as much as a disaster as that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I want, of course, we won't end the show without asking you, without talking about Pacquiao.
Yeah.
Manny Pacquiao, of course, you said, and Floyd Mayweather, the biggest fight in history. A rematch?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think happy. Floyd always taunting that he's going to come back, but I can't see him ever committing to a rematch. It would still be a huge box office attraction. It's amazing what Senator Pacquiao's accomplished the last couple of years, especially like, look, with Matisse, a lot of people said that Matisse had 1 foot out the door, so they discredited Pacquiao's effort. But I thought that was the sharpest his right hook had looked in years, which I believe is one of his most underrated weapons. But then to bring that against Thurman, and then when Thurman tried to turn up the wick in the middle rounds to be able to absorb and handle that challenge, I thought was highly impressive. You throw the Bronner win in there as well. Like, it's incredible this late run he's had in his career. You got to think, like, when did Manny turn pro? 1995, was it? Like, it just, how on earth is he still going? Like, there's fighters that were born in 1995 whose careers are over. and
Yeah, yeah.
and he's still flourishing. So yeah, I don't think we'll see the rematch. I hope that Manny goes out on top of his game though, because after everything he's accomplished in the sport, you want to see him go out a champion because that's what he is.
Okay. All right. But Floyd is coming back. You said he just announced that he's gonna have a fight in Japan, an exhibition as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing with Uchiyama.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I was with Uchiyama in December. I went to visit him at his gym. He's still in incredible shape. So that might be a little bit tougher than tension, but he's still way too small for Floyd.
Ah, okay. Right. Another small guy, Japanese guy. Easy
Yeah,
money.
130 pounds. He was about one. I think he said he was like 143 when we were with him. Floyd's walking at like 160, 165.
Yeah.
Huge.
The only because Filipinos, of course, from our perspective, we wanted to get back at Floyd Mayweather, and I think the only way we can get Floyd Mayweather in the ring is an exhibition bout with Manny.
Yeah, probably so. I can't see it happening though. I think
Okay.
Floyd knows how to tease it to keep building his brand.
Yeah, he's very good at that. Uh, I want to also ask you, ranking Pacquiao and Mayweather, who's above all time? It's
Yeah, I've
a
seen
hard,
a
tricky
lot of
one.
discussion. For me, it's pretty easy. The
Okay.
problem we've got in the modern era is everybody glamorizes an unbeaten record and they demonize losses.
Hmm.
You look at the legacy; it's easy to stack up. Pacquiao's got the better legacy. So like, I'm not, and that's not to discredit Floyd. Floyd's a top 15 to top 20 fighter of all time, but I believe Pacquiao's in the lower half of the top 10. So with that, I would take Pacquiao's legacy every day of the week. You got to don't just look at the guys that he beat at the championship level, because we all know of, you know, Morales, um,
Hmm.
Marquez, Tim Bradley, Barrera, all those guys. But look at the guys that he beat on the way up to get there, like guys like my countrymen, Nadal Hussein, Arnel Baratillo, guys like that. They're guys. Floyd didn't beat guys like that on the way up. I know Pacquiao's had more fights, but Pacquiao's early fights reflected more quality in terms of the guys that he beat. People forget, Pacquiao's first world championship because it was so long ago. But look at how many elite operators he's beaten from then through to modern day. It's not even a question.
I missed you there a little bit.
Yeah, I was saying that, if you look at Pacquiao's legacy through to the modern day and the level of competition he's fought throughout his career, it's not even a question who you rate higher historically.
Okay. So Pacquiao is high. I know your number one is Sugar Ray Rob. Is it Sugar Ray Robinson? Your number one?
Yeah, Ray Robinson and then Henry Armstrong. Very
Henry
firm
Armstrong.
very firm on the first two. Thereafter, it opens up a little bit. But I would rate Leonard. I would rate Duran. It's Joe Louis, and then it opens up. That's what I'm saying. Pacquiao's in the second half of the top 10 all time in my book.
Okay. We're having a little bit of issue with the connection. You sound like Optimus Prime now, but can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfect. Is that any better on my side?
Yeah, you're lagging now. Maybe we're over time. Um, just a few more minutes. I just need to get through the Pacquiao set of question.
Sure.
I wanted to know about your take on Pacquiao Golovkin.
Golovkin's way too big, surely. Way too big. It's
Way too big.
Yeah, I know Pacquiao's fought at 154 against Margarito, but Margarito was a smaller guy in terms of, he had fought most of his career at 47, and yeah, at what weight would Golovkin make, like 156, 157, or is it at 160? At 160 is way too big.
Okay, yeah, I thought so. I get a lot of heat from the Filipino fans because we look at Manny as a hero, and when I mentioned on my one of my podcasts now, I get a lot of heat from from the fans. Realistically, who should Pacquiao fight next?
Uh, Either of the Garcias.
It,
Probably Mikey Garcia. I love that fight. I think Pacquiao beats him, but it's a very qualified challenger.
mhm.
It's a very tough challenge. It's a fresh guy in his prime, so Pacquiao gets all the credit, all the upside when he wins, and I believe he would win.
Oh, okay. Jeff Horn rematch.
Is there any upside for Manny in that? I think
Uh,
most people believe he won the first fight, so it's legacy wise. I don't think it changes anything. I
mm,
don't think there's an upside for Manny.
okay. I think Jeff Horn is willing to fight in the Philippines, so we all wanted to have one final fight in the Philippines for Manny. And looks like that's it. What? Just one more thing. I'm not gonna ask you anymore about the Fury and the heavyweights. Because one fighter under you, Ubali, is under your management, right? Is that right?
Yeah, he's with MTK. Yep,
Okay.
correct.
Donaire Ubali fight. What
What a
can
fight!
people expect?
I think fireworks. It's going to be interesting to see how much Nonito left in the ring with Inoue, whether that was his last great stand or whether he's able to replicate and bring it again. It's a very dangerous fight for Ubali. He can't make mistakes. Nonito's left hook could give him a lot of trouble all night. We are confident that Ubali's got the skill to box in and out and be able to just be a little bit too fresh and a little bit too sharp in his movement for Nonito, but it's a very, very tough fight. Make no mistake, it's the toughest fight of his career to date.
Okay, I'm very much looking forward to this. There's a lot of great matchup that has come out from Showtime. What are you looking forward to see aside from those fight that I mentioned? Promote any fighters or fight you have.
Well, I think that in the next month, you're going to see with MTK Global, we're rolling out shows 4 weeks in a row through August. So featuring a lot of the young stars in our stable. There's going to be some great cards. The one that I'll plug is August 15. So we have Mick Conlon. There's a lot of talk of Mick Conlon dropping to 122 pounds, which is going to be interesting. This fight's at featherweight. He's fighting a former world title challenger in Sofiane Taku. And also Carl Frampton's returning on that card. So we're very excited for that show. And we look forward to seeing how we're going to place both of those fighters once they come out of the ring safely on that night. So I'd say look out for that schedule. And of course, before year end, look out for Tyson Fury knocking out Deontay Wilder again.
Yeah, there you go. I don't have to ask you. You already said your prediction or what you want to have. I feel this. I feel the same way. Tyson Fury is a far better boxer than any of the heavyweights right now. I actually felt that he can beat Tyson in his prime, in both of their prime.
Yeah, I think it's sacrilege to pick him over Tyson, considering that he was named after Mike. So I think it's sacrilege. But yeah, Mike never performed well against tall guys who knew how to use their range and distance.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
who knows? I'm going to sit on the fence on that one, but it would have been a fun fight to watch.
Okay. All right. Again, I want to thank you. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you here on my show. Hopefully, we can chat again. I want to give you your last message. Thanks. And of course, in the Philippines, I always ask my guests if you have any shout outs from any friends, family. So you may do all that before we end.
Oh, shout out! Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I know she'll be watching. To my sister Rose, to my sister Kate, shout out to you guys.
Yeah. Any other message? Last parting message.
Just if you want to follow me at MJ Altamura on Twitter, and to follow the podcast at TFG Altamura on Twitter, and of course follow MTK Global, mtkglobal.com. And Pal, I appreciate your time. I look forward to having you on my podcast in future.
Oh wow, wow! It will be an honor to be there. Thank you very much once again, and well, again, I'll see you around, and I will end the show. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
All right, I'll send you a message personally, privately, but have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. All right. Wow. What a conversation we had, and 1 hour and a half. Thank you very much again, Mike. And hopefully I can get you back again soon. There's a lot of things that I wrote down and I still wanted to ask you, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I think I've spent more than what I asked for. So anyway, I just wanted to also ask you guys for tonight. I have another interview. Marlon Tapales, Filipino boxer, wrote a champion as well. I'll be interviewing him at 9 p.m. Manila time. So please join me. And if you're not yet subscribed, please do subscribe. For all the people that ask or that has questions, um, apologize, I wasn't able to go through with them. Maybe next time with Mike. So I'm just looking for my outro, and I'm gonna have to say goodbye again. Don't forget to follow Mike Altamura's Fight Game podcast. That's the logo, so just look for it there. And thank you once again. And I'll see you around, guys.
Powcast Sports. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.